When you hear about haunted prisons, the name Alcatraz quickly comes to mind. That famous island prison in San Francisco Bay. What most don't know is that beyond the notorious prisoners and escape attempts, something far more sinister lurks in the shadows of this place. For many, Alcatraz is merely a tourist attraction. For me, it was a nightmare from which I should never have approached. I arrived at the prison with a group of visitors. The people around me seemed carefree, snapping selfies and laughing. But there was something in the air that wouldn't let me be. The wind cut through the hallways like it was whispering secrets of the past, and a feeling of being watched weighed heavily on my shoulders. The daylight barely penetrated the thick fog, and the surroundings felt less like a historical relic and more like a living tomb. The story we were told involved a brutal riot in 1946. Prisoners, treated like animals, attempted to escape. The blood stained the floor, and the terror of that day was never fully forgotten. They say the echoes of that night still resonate in the corridors. As we moved on, the sense of claustrophobia intensified. The walls seemed to suck the air from around me, compressing my lungs. As we passed cell 14, a chill ran down my spine. There was something different about it, a coldness that hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a muffled lament, but not from outside. It was as if it was coming from within me. Against my better judgment, I stopped and looked closer. I stepped away from the group without a second thought. Curiosity, or insanity, guided me. I entered the cell. The air was heavy, almost solid. On the wall, inscriptions left by former prisoners, like silent screams. What caught my attention was a mark, an imprint of a hand, but what disturbed me was its reddish hue, as if something much darker had happened there. It was as if the cell was alive, pulsating, waiting. I turned to exit, and at the end of the corridor, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A shadow, a human figure, but without defined features, floating at the corridor's end. My mouth went dry. I blinked several times, hoping it was just my mind playing tricks, but it was still there. Slowly, the shadow began to move toward me. "What the hell?" I muttered, forcing my legs to move and return to the group. But when I reached the dining hall, a strange emptiness took over the environment. What had once been loud and filled with tourists was now eerily quiet. It was then that I saw them. Sitting at the tables, silent phantoms. Men in uniform, forgotten prisoners of time, motionless, as if waiting for something. The air was thick with a metallic scent. But the most disturbing part was the silence, deep, almost suffocating. I stood there, paralyzed, until one of them lifted his head. His eyes, or what should have been eyes, were two dark, empty holes. My heart raced. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped. This couldn't be real. They shouldn't be here. But then, a hand rose, as if it wanted to reach for something, or someone. My instincts finally kicked in, and I bolted. The feeling that something was right behind me was overwhelming. My footsteps echoed through the halls, and terror engulfed me. I stumbled into a small archive room, locking myself inside. I needed to calm down, think. My chest heaved too quickly. That's when I saw the book. On the table, a dusty folder, titled, "Stories of Alcatraz, Those Who Never Left." With trembling hands, I opened the book. Pages and pages of old records, but something was wrong. The words began to distort in my vision, transforming into horrific images, flashbacks of the riot, the screams, the terror. I was witnessing, feeling every moment. The doors behind me began to creak, as if someone was trying to get in. The air around me vibrated, heavy with a suffocating presence. The silence was shattered by a terrible sound, a low laugh, but without humor. The room started to darken, and I felt the temperature plummet drastically. Something was with me there, something that no longer belonged to the world of the living. Suddenly, the words in the book changed. They were no longer stories of prisoners. They were names, names of visitors who never left the prison. And then I saw my own. The truth crashed over me like an avalanche. I was already trapped. Trapped in Alcatraz in a way that no one would ever understand. The shadows, the phantoms, they weren't ghosts of prisoners. They were like me, people who dared to come too close, to dig where they shouldn't. And now, I was part of this place. The door slowly creaked open behind me, but I knew what was coming. The shadows wouldn't let me leave. Not this time.
I can still hear the sound of the iron bars slamming shut behind me, like I'm trapped inside my own head. The cold echo reverberating through the stone corridors of HMP Shepton Mallet, the oldest prison still in operation in the world, located in Somerset, England. Founded in 1610, its stone walls carry centuries of misery. But the truth is much older than any official record. That's something I learned the hard way. At first, it seemed like just another prison, a place to keep dangerous men away from the rest of society. But there was something different about Shepton Mallet. Something I couldn't see, but I felt the moment I stepped inside. The air was thick, oppressive, as if the very bricks were soaked in despair. And one thing that bothered me from the start, the silence. A place like this, packed with criminals, should be loud, chaotic. But instead, the prison was too quiet, as if it were listening. That first night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the discomfort of the cell, or maybe it was something deeper, but my eyes wouldn't close. In the silence, I could swear I heard soft footsteps in the corridors, like someone pacing back and forth. But there was no one, just me, my cellmate Felix, a gaunt old man with hollow eyes, and that damned darkness. Over the next few days, I heard whispers, muffled voices that seemed to seep from the walls, echoing through the aging stone. At first, I thought it was the other prisoners, speaking in hushed tones, planning something. But then I realized the words weren't in English. It wasn't a language I knew. It was ancient, guttural, and angry. Felix told me it was the curse of the prison, the result of a massacre that happened centuries ago, when the place wasn't even called a prison and served as a fortress during England's civil revolts. Now, I know what you're thinking. Massacre, curse, sounds like some kind of tall tale, right? I thought the same. But Felix was dead serious, and after a while, so was I. Many years ago, before laws, before codes, Shepton Mallet was a place of chaos. A rebellion broke up among the prisoners who, after years of mistreatment, decided to take control. They were led by a man named Aldrich. Every prisoner who hears this story makes the sign of the cross when mentioning his name. Aldrich, it seems, was no ordinary prisoner. They say he came from a faraway place, brought here as a prisoner of war, not for common crimes. Aldrich had practiced rituals, old magic. He spoke of pacts with forces beyond human comprehension, and over the years he was imprisoned, he attracted followers. The guards, of course, never took the stories circulating among the cells seriously until it was too late. The rebellion was swift, brutal. Prisoners turned on guards with uncontrollable violence. However, when the prisoners finally took control, that's when things got strange. Aldrich led them to the deepest dungeons of the prison, where, according to legend, he conducted a ritual. They said he was trying to unleash something, a spirit or an entity trapped within the very foundations of the prison, something that had existed long before Shepton Mallet. What happened after that is hazy, but all the prisoners involved in the ritual vanished. They simply disappeared. Their bodies were never found, and since that day, the walls started to talk, to whisper. Aldrich, they say, unleashed something ancient, something hungry, and from that day on, no one inside those walls was ever the same again. As for me, my curiosity led me to explore the tunnels. I'm not exactly a prudent man. I've always been the type that, when I see a closed door, I feel an almost uncontrollable compulsion to open it. And that's exactly what I did. During my time working in prison maintenance, I found a passage that went deeper than any I'd ever seen, and of course, I followed it. The deeper I went, the stronger the smell of decay and dampness became. The air grew heavier, almost suffocating. And the voices in the walls seemed to follow me. Eventually, I reached a locked room with a rusty iron door, something that seemed forgotten by time. I pushed the door open, and there it was. A chair, right in the center of a circle of symbols carved into the floor. They pulsed, almost as if they were alive, absorbing the light from the torch I held. I felt the air grow cold suddenly, and when I turned, there he was. A man, or what used to be a man, draped in a dark cloak, his face obscured by a hood that only revealed his eyes, empty and pale as the moon. He said nothing, but I knew what he wanted. Aldrich. Or, at least, what was left of him. Aldrich, the liberator of monsters, now imprisoned by his own creation. I backed away, not out of fear, well, maybe a little out of fear, but because I knew that place was wrong. The voices intensified, and the room began to shake. The symbols on the floor glowed with a cold light, and the walls seemed to close in around me. An invisible force started to pull me toward that chair, as if the shadows themselves were trying to drag me into Aldrich's unfinished ritual. But I wasn't willing to pay the price. With one last push, I broke free from the force pulling me in. I ran, stumbling over loose stones as the voices whispered my name, begging me to stay. They screamed, laughed, calling me a coward. And maybe I was. But one thing was for sure, I was still breathing, and those the walls had swallowed would never see the light of day again. I scrambled up the stairs, my heart hammering in my chest. When I reached my cell, Felix was lying on his bed, motionless, but not like he was asleep. It was as if the walls had drained everything from him. He was no longer a man, just a shell empty. I knew I didn't have much time. That thing down there was awake, and it was hungry. In the dead of night, I prepared to escape. The plan didn't matter anymore. It was now, or, well, you get the idea. The maintenance room window was my only shot, but the hallway leading to it felt like an endless tunnel of shadows. I could feel its presence, Aldrich's, or whatever he had unleashed. I pressed forward, my heart beating like a drum, sweat dripping down my back. When I finally reached the room, the window was there my way out, but the shadows moved, crawling along the walls. I felt invisible hands grab at me, fingers cold as ice closing around my ankles, pulling me back. With a shout, I fought. I don't know where I found the strength, but I broke free. I climbed through the window with everything I had, feeling the shadows stretch, trying to pull me back. The wind outside was like a cold blade, cutting my face as I fell onto the stone ground. When I got up, I looked back one last time. The shadows, they were there at the window, watching, but they couldn't reach me. I was outside. I was free.
Have you ever heard of Paglia Island? A desolate patch of land in Italy between Venice and Lido that once served as a quarantine station, a psychiatric hospital, and even a prisoner camp. I knew that before being sent there, but the truth, well, the truth is much more disturbing. I got caught up in some trouble, nothing too serious, at least not in my eyes. But in Italy, if you get involved with the wrong people, you pay the price. I was thrown into Paglia Prison. Yes, that island people say is cursed. I laughed when I heard it. You know, that nervous laugh. The kind you let out when you know something's off, but you'd rather pretend it's just a myth. I've always been the kind of guy who likes to test boundaries. But this prison, it tests you. The ferry that took me there already had this strange smell. Not the kind of thing you can see, like rot. No, it was something you feel in the air, like the wind itself whispered of old stories of pain and suffering. Paglia during the plague was used to burn bodies, thousands of them. Later, it became a psychiatric hospital. They say the screams of the patients still echo through the prison walls. I didn't believe it, of course. Not at first. We arrived. The prison, a monstrous, crumbling stone beast, eroded by time and screams. The cells were tiny, like stone coffins, and the silence, overwhelming. When the cell door closed, a chill ran through me that I couldn't explain. Only later did I understand what was happening. The first night, I was trying to sleep, but the wind that passed through the cracks in the stone sounded human, like a whisper. I turned in my bed, trying to ignore it. But then I heard it. A sound like nails scraping the stone. At first, I thought it was a rat. But then came that sound, a soft laugh, something that echoed not in the room, but in the walls of my mind. Go to hell, I muttered, trying to convince myself it was just isolation messing with me. The next morning, I asked one of the guards if he heard anything. The guy just stared at me with dead eyes and said, "If you heard something, it's best not to hear it again." I laughed, of course. I always laugh. But the nervousness had started creeping in, because that night, it wasn't just laughter. The cell next to mine was empty, at least that's what they said. But in the middle of the night, I heard chains dragging from there. I went to the bars and peeked. Nothing. But the sound was there louder. I felt a presence, something cold, dense. I knew I wasn't alone. "Who's there?" I asked. No response, just the sound. And then I saw it. Something moved quickly in the darkness. My legs froze, my heart raced. I tried to scream, but the words wouldn't come out. That thing, I don't know what it was. It wasn't human, not entirely. It was a shadow, a formless figure, the eyes. No, not eyes. They were dark holes, like doors open to nothingness. It got closer and I just ran. I ran to the other side of the cell like a scared rat, the courage draining out of me like water down a sink. The next morning I knew I had to get out of there. But Paglia, it doesn't let you go. At least not really. I tried to keep my head straight, but things got worse. They said that back in the day, prisoners would vanish from the island, swallowed by something. No one knew exactly what, but I could feel it. Paglia was alive. The walls pulsed with an ancestral evil energy. One night, I was in the yard trying to clear my head. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. It was then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned around, startled. No one. But I heard a voice, soft and sweet, like a mother calling her child. "Come, it's time." Man, I ran. I ran like never before. I got back to my cell, slammed the door shut, but it was there. No matter where I went, the voice followed me. The shape in the shadows grew, and the chains. Now they were my soundtrack. On the last night, before everything ended, I finally understood. This wasn't just a prison. It was a portal to something much worse. The souls trapped here weren't just gone. They were prisoners, captive to something far older than the island itself. They wanted me with them. I knew it. And deep down, I knew I had no choice. You think you're safe, that you can escape. But on Paglia, you don't escape. The island, it consumes you, piece by piece, until you become a shadow, an echo. There's no way out. That night, I felt the ground open beneath me. The earth of Paglia is like quicksand for the soul, you know. Once you're in, you never come back.